The topic is knowing self is the beginning of everything. Attract your success, happiness, and peace. And our speakers are Leon Sawchuk, Iftak Rajkumar, Alison Larson. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you guys for coming. I'm going to be leading us through the next 20 minutes and then hand it over to these lovely ladies. So I see some familiar faces, but for those of you who do not know me, my name is Leanne, and I reside in a city outside of Toronto, Canada, and that's where I have a private practice as a registered psychotherapist and art therapist, and specializing in eating disorders, body image issues, addiction, trauma, and anxiety and depression. So I'm going to be taking us through the journey of knowing yourself and inner transformation. And this topic really touches my heart in a lot of ways. So I'm going to start today by talking a little bit about my own personal journey, and then I'm going to take it more to the cerebral part and talk about the process. So I'm going to start with saying that around the age of 1, I stopped remembering. And I didn't start remembering again until approximately the age of 13. And even that's a little bit blurry. I used to feel like I lost about 13 years of my life because I don't remember it. But I look at it now as being the catalyst for what eventually fueled me in my inner transformation and my journey. However, around this time when I started to remember, around the age of 13, I really didn't like myself. If anything, I hated myself. I had no self-love, I had no self-worth, I thought I was disgusting. A lot of different things were happening for me at this time. So definitely, I know this sounds probably heavy, but I'm just taking you guys through part of my earlier experience. So all this hate and disgust eventually led into a very serious behavioral addiction. So in this behavioral addiction, I started doing things that behavioral addicts do. I started starving myself, over-exercising, eating, throwing up, and over-analyzing everything, basically. But to the outside world, I had it all together. Even though I was changing, my body was changing, I was looking different, nobody seemed to notice. And mostly because, like I said, I still kept myself in a very organized way. And really, I was after perfection, whatever that means. So I went through this journey of just overall not liking myself, not even really knowing myself. And I remember very clearly the first time that I hit rock bottom. I was around 18 at this point, and I still lived at home with my parents. I had gotten home. I was in a lot of pain because throughout that day I'd taken a lot of different pills, laxatives, diuretics, diet pills. I just left the gym. I was there for about 4 hours. I had no energy left. I was angry, and I just wanted to go to bed. But I couldn't because I was in so much pain. So I got into bed, laid in the fetal position. And it's interesting because when I look back now, I look at this moment as being a moment of self-awareness, even though I didn't experience it as awareness at the time. I had this feeling like that night may be the end, but I really didn't care. So I laid in bed, I was in a lot of pain, and then all of a sudden I started sweating, my fingers, my hands went numb, and I started having severe chest pains. Now, I don't know if you guys know this, but eating disorders has the highest mortality rate amongst all disorders, and like this before where you try to yell or you're like maybe even waking up from a dream and you feel like physically like you can't move. So I managed to roll myself out of the bed, hit the floor, and I crawled to my parents' bedroom. Once I reached there, I tried again to get their attention by using my voice, and I couldn't, which is an interesting metaphor for the rest of this talk. And I started banging on their dresser and making noise. My mom got startled, she woke up, and they called 911. Anyways, long story short, I get to the hospital. There's a doctor there, a couple of nurses, and an interventionist, which is interesting because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. They work lovely hours. And I remember laying in the hospital bed, hooked up to IVs, and just wondering what was next for me, but also not really caring. And I remember hearing the interventionist say to my parents, you know, your daughter really needs help. If she doesn't get help, she's probably going to die. And in that moment, very briefly, I felt relieved. I felt, okay, this is it. I'm going to get the help that I need. And just as quickly as I felt that relief, I heard my father respond by saying, no, it's okay. She's fine. She's just going through a fad. This is something that all girls do. So that relief went away. I eventually got discharged from the hospital, went home, and for the next 8 years, I continued. I had relapse after relapse. I hit rock bottom probably at least another 8 or 9 times. Similar things. I learned out I had a stroke. So all of these things were occurring over the course of several years. But in that same time, I went to university because I got a scholarship, and I was completing my psychology degree and my minor in fine arts, and nobody knew any different. So it was my secret. It was my double life. Finally, towards my third year of university, I decided I can't do this anymore. My brain wasn't functioning. I was scattered. I couldn't focus on my studies. My grades were starting to drop. I was probably going to fail. So I decided to stop and not go back for the 4th year and take time and just figure out whatever I needed to do. So I continued with my behavioral addiction. I started working, and that's when I met somebody. And I don't know that this was the catalyst for change, but what happened when I met this person, who I eventually ended up marrying, was I felt witnessed for the first time. My secrets were no longer secrets. He noticed my behaviors as being a little odd, like going out to restaurants, having maybe, a piece of lettuce, getting the rest packed, being at the gym for hours a day. All of these things to him were a little strange. Finally, I opened up to him and I told him about my struggle, owned my story, observed it, allowed somebody else in. And through a lot of force, he eventually encouraged me gently to get help. I eventually saw my doctor, who I'd been avoiding like the plague for about 10 years, and right away he said, you need to go into treatment. We need to get you in right away. So I didn't want to go into treatment because I wasn't ready to change. I didn't want to give up this identity that I had had since I was 13, right? This is who I was. This is how I lived. Who was I going to be without this? So lo and behold, I ended up going into treatment. I went to a treatment facility that's located in Mississauga. I spent 6 months there, first few months as inpatient, and then I got kicked out. I wish that there was a happy ending to that, but they kicked me out for being too honest. So I left, found a therapist. That didn't work out because he didn't want to look at me. He wanted to sit behind me and take notes. Then I found a few other people, and finally I found this woman who was a psychotherapist, and she had her own story and her struggle with an eating disorder for 13 years. Oh, and I forgot to mention that when I went to the hospital, I was finally diagnosed. And I say finally because, I had been struggling for so long with bulimia nervosa. And I'm not one for labels. Those of you that know me and maybe have listened to my other talks, when I work with my clients, I try to remove us from the label, remove us from I am depressed, I am anxious, I'm an alcoholic. But for some people, the initial diagnosis of these things is liberating because finally they feel that they belong somewhere, that they can relate to other people. So I just wanted to mention that part. So I went through my own course of therapy with this woman, and some of her techniques I use with my own clients now. And I started the journey of really getting to know myself for the first time in my life. This was a little tricky because a lot of times when you go to therapy, you try to make connections with your past, which is something I can't do because I don't remember it. So we had to start from the present moment and work our way back. I couldn't talk about my upbringing. I couldn't talk about my relationships with my parents. I couldn't talk about anything because I'm not sure what happened. But I know that I endured trauma because I was exhibiting symptoms of PTSD. So, getting to know yourself, I'm going to get to more of a cerebral place now and talk about my journey in conjunction with what I take my clients through. But before I do that, after I finished with this therapist, I ended up going back to school, completing my degree in psychology, and then I went on to do my post 4-year degree to become a psychotherapist, and then I went on to specialize in eating disorders, and that's what I do. So when I work with people to get to know themselves, I use a lot of the techniques that I used and then some that I've learned along the way. And the first step is truly getting to know who you are, right? And this really involves increasing your awareness and becoming more observant of yourself, noticing yourself throughout the day, noticing how you're feeling throughout the day, noticing how you interact with people, how do you respond to people, how do you respond to yourself, really paying attention. I think as a society, we spend so much time in the present or in the past, right? Anxiety is future, depression is past, right? So we spend so much time in so many places other than the present moment. So this was huge for me, because that also involves, if you get to know yourself and be in the present moment, that involves you have to spend time with yourself. I wasn't used to doing that. So I spent a lot of time utilizing different mindfulness techniques like meditation and yoga. And I do this thing, and I encourage my clients in the program I have with them to do something called solitude. Very simple, but basically with people spend time with themselves. You can meditate during that time, but you literally shut off. And for those people that know me well now, they know that this is something I still need to do. Just shut off, turn off the phone, turn off everything, and be in your own company. So that's a huge thing in terms of cultivating your own self-awareness, right? And I'm sure these ladies who've gotten to know me know even throughout the conference that I've been like, gotta go to my room, see you later. And it's just a matter of shutting off. It's my own healing. Maybe immersing yourself into nature. You start to learn ways that you really get to know who you are. And once you do that, then the next step is by evaluating your story. I think a lot of times, at least myself and the clients that I work with, people have a story that they tell themselves. And this is a story that they live by. My story was that I am not good enough, I am not worthy, and I do not deserve love. That was my story. So before I could get to moving on and trying to create a better story for myself, a true story, I had to own that one first. I had to become aware of that one first. So once I did that, then I could dig deeper into, well, why don't I love myself? Why don't I think I'm worthy? Why don't I deserve connection? And this took time, a few years actually. And once I did that, then I felt empowered. I felt like, okay, I've worked through these things. Now I can create a new story for myself. I can create a new beginning, and that beginning can start right now. I can learn who am I for the very first time, outside of bulimia, outside of everything. And that's what I did. Not easy, by the way. It's common to always want to go back to your original story because it's comfortable. And part of owning